Welcome to the Dice Tower Daily Chat. I'm your host, Roy Cannaday, and with me today is Brad Andrews from Mondo Games. What's going on, man?
Not much. How you doing, man?
I am doing awesome. I'm super excited to have you here because I know you have a huge history with all sorts of LCGs and card games and all sorts of games that people may have heard about, and you are on the horizon of putting out a bunch of new games here with Mondo as well. So I'm super excited to have you here, to have the audience ask questions, and just to talk to you.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be here. I've spent a long time at FFG, working in the LCG department. I think there's not too many LCGs that I haven't had some influence on in some way, shape, or form. Had a lot, a lot of games that I've gotten to the great privilege of working on. But recently, I moved over to Mondo Games and the head game designer over there.
I think it's crazy because you worked on a bunch of my favorite games from FFG, and now you're going to be working on one of my favorite games from Mondo and Restoration, which is Unmatched.
Oh man, Unmatched has been so much fun to work with. The Restoration team, games team, is just wonderful. It has been really, really fun collaborating with them on some of the future sets that I can't talk about as much as I wish I could.
I think the cool thing about being on the Mondo side of the whole deal with Unmatched is that it's all the licensed stuff that might be creeping into the game, which I'm sure is a lot of that's super hush-hush, but there's been a lot of exciting stuff that's already been announced. Like you guys did the Jurassic Park stuff, and then I know Buffy's supposed to be coming soon as well.
Yeah, Buffy's actually going to be on sale on the Mondo site next month, and probably hitting retail around November, so you guys should look out for that. Buffy set is so much fun. It's so thematic. I just love playing with Buffy because she can just book across the stage. She can move through enemies. It's ridiculous. She feels like the Slayer. It's so much fun.
I really do wonder if there's going to be any certain combinations of like one player playing Dracula and another player playing Buffy mixing in from the different, like the Cobble and Fog set and the other set. Like, is there a specific? It would be interesting to see if there was something that's like, gotcha, Dracula. I don't know. It's kind of funny.
And we really like to consider all of the heroes all together when looking at overall balance and fun factor. So that's really a big consideration because people want to go into that space. They want to try out, interesting combinations like that. I mean, who doesn't want to see Buffy fight Dracula?
I think one of the fun things too is like those games like that where it's just like you put out all of the characters at the beginning of the game. You're like, we're gonna play Unmatched. Who do you want to play as?
Definitely. Who's your favorite character?
So far, oh man, who's my favorite so far? Strangely enough, I've really enjoyed Medusa. I need to play the Jurassic Park stuff more because those raptors look really cool. But I haven't had a chance to play them enough. But I've had a lot of fun with Medusa in the past just because she has all the little minions running around and she can turn people into stone and has good range and stuff like that. So I'm excited to see how everything changes up.
Medusa's so good. I really love the raptors, but I'm really excited about the T-Rex, honestly.
Yeah. So that set's already been announced, right? And everything, or
we haven't released too many details about it yet. But the T-Rex is coming, and she's huge. Let me tell you, this miniature. Yeah, I mean, miniature really doesn't describe it very well.
That's funny because way back in the days, Justin Jacobson was like, hey, you have a 3D printer, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, can you print this for me? And he sent me a T-Rex STL file. It was like, Roy, print this for me. I printed it out and gave it to him so he could play test it. So I have a strange connection with this T-Rex set, even though I've never played it at all. I just printed out a T-Rex for Justin Jacobson.
So was that the first one? Her name's Roberta, by the way.
I'm not sure. Like, it was a long time ago. It was like almost a year ago. It feels like.
Yeah. No, it's been a while. So that's probably one of the first Robertas to come out. That's awesome.
Yeah, he was just like, you have a 3D printer, print me this. I'm like, okay. When Restoration Games comes a knocking, you say, okay. But yeah, Justin's the best. But yeah, so you have a lot of experience with tons of different card games and tons of different stuff, and people start populating down below with questions that we can ask Brad. But just a little bit about your experience with working on all these different card games.
Yeah, I mean, so my first job at FFG was working on both Warhammer Invasion and
Mm.
Call of Cthulhu LCG, and then quickly got tapped to work with Nate French and Eric Lang on the Warhammer Conquest LCG,
Oh,
which
nice.
ran for a couple years until the license ended. During that time, I was working a little bit. I contributed some ideas to Lord of the Rings, but that was mostly headed up by Caleb Grace and Matt Newman, who are fantastic designers.
Hmm.
Uh, then did a little like threw some cards at Lucas Litzinger for Netrunner at the time, uh, and as we lost our license with Games Workshop.
Hmm.
I got tapped to be on the L5R team,
Gotcha.
and so spent a lot of time with that. Designed some stuff for Destiny. Uh, did some couple scenarios with Matt Newman again for Arkham Horror LCG. Contributed some ideas to Marvel. Like, yeah, was there for almost 10 years. So lots and lots of LCGs, and then of course Keyforge,
Hmm.
which I worked on with Richard, Scaff, and Nate uh, for probably like 2 years before the game came out,
Hmm.
and then led design on sets uh, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's one of the first places that I was introduced to seeing you because you were on camera a lot for a lot of those videos. I'm like, oh, Keyforge, yeah. So it's pretty awesome to see you talking about the game and hyping it up when things like that happen. Is there a certain headspace you have to be in when designing these like big, long, giant LCGs? Like, I'm sure you guys have so much stuff planned in advance.
It takes a different headspace for each game, honestly, because you're
Oh, gotcha.
trying to serve different audiences. Because you, a lot of people think of card games as very much a genre, but I
Hmm.
like to think of them much more of a spectrum, and that there is different card games and different play patterns that different groups of gamers can converge on. Just like deck builders are a spectrum of like casual to competitive to like an intensity. Competitive head-to-head card games can be in the same space, and especially when you have like as flexible a medium as LCGs, where you can even go into cooperative space.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it's so different having to work on something that's such a. I mean, card games feel like they could be broken very easily. I mean, there's tons of games out there that have ban lists and erratas and all that stuff. I'm sure trying to find those things before the game actually gets out is probably a very difficult task.
And it's especially difficult because with that kind of game, that
Hmm.
type of head-to-head competition, you're trying to ride a line. You're
Hmm.
trying to keep things in this like very thin space of exciting and fresh and new but not broken.
Hmm.
uh, and so yeah, it's definitely a process of riding that line for as long as you can.
Do you think there's a big difference in trying to design for like a competitive card game as opposed to like something cooperative? Because I know you've mostly worked on the competitive head to head, where it's very important how these things are going to play against each other. I guess there's probably a little bit more leeway in cooperative games because you're going to be playing against an AI or the board game itself or the card game itself.
It's not just that. It's really thinking about the audience that wants to come to that card game,
Mm.
thinking about how you create an experience for a player of like Arkham LCG,
Hmm.
rather than a player that's coming to L5R and being like, well, they're both looking for heavily thematic
Hmm.
experiences, but the way that theme plays out, Arkham really wants this intense story, whereas L5R wants this intense, brain burny
Mm.
experience where you're trying to plan and plot and trick and confuse your opponent. So it's different player psychographs come into these different games for different reasons,
Hmm.
and understanding that card game is just your paintbrush, and the game you make of it is your paint.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Some of those games like Game of Thrones and like L5R, like the fact that they had, like I played Magic a ton and a lot of other games, but the
Hmm.
ones that had like these multiple types of combat, like they just, like you said, brain burny, like they just hurt my head so much whenever I tried to play those games.
Yeah, and like there's definitely an audience for them.
Oh, for sure.
Uh, and I think you have some overlap with that with a game like Keyforge that plays to a more casual audience,
Hmm.
but you also have Keyforge being this entity that speaks to players that really want to experience the actual act of playing the game. You know, with so many collectible card games that have that deck building component, it it puts this extra barrier,
Mm.
and it can lead to a feeling of not being in the group if you're not going to be as hooked in, if you're not going to be as intense, if you're not going to be reading the forums, if you're not going to be going on and finding the latest net decks and really diving headfirst in the competition. I think Keyforge really allowed players to keep things more at an equal level with their
Hmm.
friends. Maybe I bought more decks than you, but really any deck can play with any deck. It was a
Right.
really, honestly, good growth experience for me looking at that new perspective. I really valued, I mean, in general, Roy, I value as many different perspectives in games,
Hmm.
many different voices as possible. That really makes all of us better.
Yeah, it's
And
awesome.
it was a good growth experience for me.
I remember like playing Magic with my friends like super casually like back in the day, and you always get the one friend, which probably me, it's my fault. But you always get the one friend that like is decides, "Oh, now I'm going to try hard and I'm going to go out and buy more cards and make my deck souped up." And then everybody else is like, "Now we have to go buy cards and make our deck souped up," you know? And
Yeah.
games like Keyforge or games that are more cooperative, which Keyforge is definitely not cooperative, but the fact that you can't do the same thing means that anybody can get to the table more easily without it becoming this chase to power, you know, to the very top, you know.
Yeah. And honestly, that's one of the things I really, really love about Unmatched. You know,
Mm,
whereas Keyforge
yes.
is building these randomized elements, Unmatched is really focused on creating an extremely clean, thematic, and fun
Hmm.
experience. It's something I think that owes to how well you've seen it do with
Hmm.
people is because it is so easy to enter in and feel like you're having this just like amazing gaming experience, just right from the get-go. The rules are
Hmm.
dead simple, but the thematics really sell it for me. Playing that Raptor pack, I feel like the Raptor pack.
That's awesome. I just love how casual that is too, because just grab a deck, any deck, you know. I mean, these decks are relatively balanced against each other, so you're not gonna have one that's way more powerful than the other. You can just grab one, and then it's based off of like trying to figure out how to tactically play and where your board state is, and be like, oh man, this card's gonna be really good if I'm in that perfect position. All right, I need to get myself there, bait them to come in, play the card, and man, it's I just love the headspace you can be in that game and how it can feel like you're doing strategic things, but it's also very casual because these decks are all pre-built and you just grab one and go.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Like that actually reminds me in many ways of an old favorite of mine from Plaid Hat, Summoner Wars.
Yeah. So yeah, I've definitely that's kind of the way I enjoyed playing Summoner Wars too. Like they had stuff where you could build decks and all that stuff, but I just enjoyed keeping those decks the way they were and then playing them like that because then anybody could grab any one and you'd be sort of on equal settings when you started the game.
I remember throwing down different decks any given afternoon at the game store.
Cam actually asks me, Roy, did you get your Hulk pack for Marvel Champions? If so, have you played any games with him? I actually played it 3 times today. First time I played I had Rhino set up with that Ronan the Accuser like DLC whatever, and it just crushed me like twice in a row. So then I switched over to Green Goblin and actually won because Ronan is. I don't think you're supposed to beat it. You're just supposed to lose. But it was fun. It's definitely cool stuff. But yes, I just got it, and I know you don't follow me on social media because I've been posting that stuff everywhere. So
Yeah,
there is that.
Roy's been posting about it all day.
That's kind of how I do. So Kabuki Kid asks, who devised the concept of an LCG?
Oh man, so that goes way back, and it really I think boils down to you know Christian T. Peterson in conversation with Eric Lang about like how do we do a different type of card game. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that's a little even before my time, because the first LCG, which was I believe they converted Call of Cthulhu and
Game of
Game of
Thrones.
Thrones, into an LCG, and then the first pure LCG was actually Warhammer Invasion. So those all happened at the same time, and it was years before my time at the company. So I came in right near the end of Invasion's life cycle.
That's awesome. So is that kind of like the LCG that brought you in? Were you just kind of put on Invasion, or were you like super huge into Invasion before you started working with Fantasy Flight?
I was just hungry. I was just getting out of college. I started working for Fantasy Flight Games the day after I graduated college.
Oh, damn.
I started working in their game center. It was called the Event Center at the time, and I was hungry. I had decided that paleontology, which was what my degree was in, academia wasn't going to be for me, and like I was just taking some time to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and I was like, I'll work in a game store. And I got there, and I'm like, man, like I've been making games for myself since I was 16. I can really make a run out of this. And so it wasn't specifically about being into Invasion. It was really, I really wanted to be a designer, and I knew since I'd been playing Magic since I was 7 years old that like card games were something I knew and I was comfortable in. And then I started bumping into this guy called Eric Lang. You guys might have heard of him, and he really helped get me my start. We had some early conversations. He had me do a design test on Warhammer Invasion stuff, and kind of gave me the like, okay, you kind of know what you're doing. So, and really encouraged me to get in contact with like Nate French over at FFG. He's the executive game designer there now. Nate and I had lunch, and then I got really involved in playtesting of the Star Wars LCG, and did a lot of work with Eric, Nate, and Eric Dahlman, who was at FFG at the time, working on the Star Wars LCG. And one thing led to another. They had an opening in the department, and they wanted me to take it. So here I am, years later.
When I set up the overlay for this, I have like Brad with Mondo Games right above your head, but I really wanted to put a dinosaur on there just because it's like it seems like dinosaurs are so involved in your persona and personality and apparently your schooling,
Hey, oh man, I love dinosaurs. They're definitely a passion of mine, and along with that, birds. So I bird watch and stuff. It's been really great during quarantine, just being able to look outside and spend a good hour watching birds.
So what you're saying is we have you to blame for dinosaurs in Keyforge, basically?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, my minor is in classics. So, Greco-Roman dinosaurs is kind of my college experience summarized. And
there you go. That's
Keyforge.
Awesome. That makes a ton of sense. Oh, let's see whatever questions we got here. Okay, here you go. Gator Dave says, "What is the best dinosaur?"
Okay, so I have a strong opinion, and it's Dilophosaurus, who most folks are going to remember from Jurassic Park being the one that kills Newman from Seinfeld, with the the big frill and spitting poison and whatnot. And I have a crusade against Jurassic Park a little bit for that, because it's inaccurate to how the dinosaur actually was. So that's why in Keyforge I made sure we had more of a scientifically accurate depiction of Dilophosaurus.
I always find those conversations super interesting, where it's like the whole, I know Neil deGrasse Tyson does it a ton, where he's like, oh, this movie was inaccurate because this and this. I just find that super intriguing and interesting, and it's kind of funny that like you're like, no, in this card game we're kind of make these dinosaurs more accurate to how the dinosaurs were like back in the day.
It's just so interesting, being a dinosaur guy, and having this perception of this dinosaur, and how Jurassic Park really affected the pop culture impression of Dilophosaurus, to the point where, like, when Magic the Gathering included a Dilophosaurus card, they gave it the frill and they made it's called a something Death Spitter. They included the things that Jurassic Park made up for the dinosaur into it because, I mean, obviously, why wouldn't they? Like, it is the pop culture perception of what this dinosaur is, and for the Jurassic Park IP, that is correct for that IP. And so, like, any IP thing you'd see in that, will obviously you need to respect that because that is what it is for that IP. But like, it's not what the actual dinosaur is, and I and again, this is me getting caught up on a dinosaur that I'm really passionate about. But like, it's just interesting to see how that variation can be.
I think we need like a scientifically accurate dinosaur game, sort of like to do what do for dinosaurs what Wingspan has done for birds. You know, it's like this is the tail length and this is what it had, and no, it didn't spit. You know, that sort of thing.
I mean, I'm totally fine with that. I love Wingspan. Elizabeth did such a wonderful job with that game. It's just kind of a joy to play, and as a birder, like, I love all the little facts on there. It makes me feel welcome, and I've played it and engaged a lot of my birder friends with Wingspan and really opened their eyes to the wide world of board games. So I'm really glad to see the success that game has had, and with a scientific background and I have a scientific brain, and so seeing that hunger and that excitement for that type of game, I'd love to do a dinosaur, an accurate dinosaur game. It would warm my heart.
I think it's very interesting because I know Elizabeth has like that whole scientific birder type mentality for all that stuff as well. It's just really interesting and cool to see people like approach games and making them like. I mean, it's not like it's educational in your face, you know. It's not like it's. I mean, it is teaching you things, but the game mechanics and everything are still like solid as well, you know.
And that's the thing is, like, when you really break it down, games are learning. Every time you play a game, you're learning how to be better at that game. You're learning things to do, things to not do. And so we think of these thematics that we lay over mechanical structures. We think of those as being like what engages us. But you can engage people on any level you want as long as you do it in a fun and entertaining way. And I think Wingspan really bridges that gap for me, and I think it's why we've seen so much success with it. Like, Elizabeth just nailed that aspect of it. It's just really, really awesome to see.
That's awesome. Gator Dave also asks, when designing, do you normally start with a theme or mechanics for the game? This is like the typical designer question right here.
It can matter so much that some games come from so like, I'll take L5R for example. L5R is built mechanically up, but that mechanic is informed by philosophy, and so the whole game is based on a concept called Mono no Aware, which is a Japanese philosophy that roughly translates to the pathos of things. Basically, what we have in this moment is always changing, and we owe it to ourselves and to the place we live to accept that, and things will change, transitions will happen, and there's beauty in that. I always equated it to the feeling of like the last day of summer when you're gathered with your friends, appropriately socially distancing around a campfire, and you know that like the summer is done and this is probably your last campfire, but it's beautiful and it's a wonderful night and you're having just a wonderful time with your friends, and you know that it's going to be another year before you can do that again. And that's the philosophy that inspired those mechanics that then we bring to Rokugan and layer on even more. So that's really, I'd say, more of a mechanically up game. Keyforge in the same vein, being like, we want to do a procedurally generated game that brings this wild, crazy world together, but like the mechanics of being able to do a game that is that out there, that crazy, that different, that comes first before we layer on the Crucible. But you take a game like Arkham Horror LCG, and that's really a thematic game that we want to sell an experience. And the thematics of the Arkham Files comes before we consider exactly what the mechanics do. I
Right.
think both are effective, and it's understanding what needs to come first to achieve your design. I'm working on a game that there's a rule that I can't talk about it right now. So I really I'm excited. I can't wait to tell you guys about it. But it is something that the mechanics and theme are really tightly woven together,
hmm
and I think it's kind of the for me, it's definitely a question of like which came first, the thematics and the mechanics, and obviously the thematics because it's licensed, but they're very much speaking to one another. Yeah, I wish I could talk more about it. I'm sorry.
That's awesome. I remember sitting in the in-flight report when Keyforge was announced or whatever, and this whole concept of these like procedurally generated decks. And I know Tom just didn't understand. He's like, I just don't understand. I was trying to explain it to him. I'm like, no, it's computers. And what the computers are doing is the computers are building the deck. He's like, I don't get it. I'm like, so after a while, he got it. But it was just, to me, I had done a lot of like watched videos on like procedurally generated stuff and machine learning and AI. And I was like, man, I wish they had gone farther. I wish they had gone even farther. Like, why even design the cards? Make the computers design the cards. You know, I think that might have been
Well,
too crazy. But it's like at a
well, have
certain
you
point,
have you seen the latest set?
right? The latest set allows you to put it puts different things on there, so it's stepping it up, right? And so,
Yeah. No, like it was funny. I've had some conversations with some designers that when it first came out, they were like, I don't know, man. Like maybe you should have gone a little simpler with the game. Like the game's really out there. You've already got this like insane concept. But honestly, I'm really happy with where it ended up. It changing it from being some sort of smash you in the face game into a racing game at its very core.
yeah,
Like because
yeah,
Keyforge is like it's a race to three keys, and so it's a race to get 18 victory points banked as quickly as you can. I think really helps the decks just interact with each other better.
right. That's awesome, and I really enjoy the thought of like the tech behind that sort of stuff. Like, do you think you'll work with those sort of tech in the future of games? I know you're a completely different place, but that's something that's still in your mind of like, how can we use technology to merge with board games in weird and interesting ways?
Definitely, I it's definitely a fascinating subject and a big thing I want to bring to the table when I'm designing games is I don't want to give people the same kinds of experiences they've already had. I
Right.
want each of my games to make a statement, something different, a new perspective, a new way to look at something. Even if I'm doing a tried and true genre of game, I want you to look at it and immediately be able to tell why it's different than something else you've played because let's be honest, we're all here looking for those new experiences. We're all looking to test our brains in a different way, and I feel that it is my job to try and find as many of those experiences from my point of view and my perspective and bring them to people as I can.
I think it's interesting, like as a reviewer and like a person that sees all sorts of different games here at the Dice Tower, we see like probably more games than almost anybody else. It's very interesting. It's like there's a lot of games that are just very much like slight tweaks on variations of mechanics or maybe a new theme. It's like, oh, here's the 37th millionth deck builder game, but it's got this theme this time. It's always interesting to see like game designs that think outside the box. It's like, okay, it's not just a new pasted on theme or a new pasted on thing. It's like, no, this is a new mechanic. This hasn't been done in board gaming before. Like, how can you? I mean, I feel like if you're going to design games, you should try to design something that's going to be different or a different experience or something that's going to make something that people don't already have on their shelves, that's like, oh, yes, that, I need that.
Well, I mean, let's look at someone else's design. So this guy named Roy, I don't know, he's made this game called Last Light. That's pretty damn original.
Yeah. Maybe, I guess. I do find it interesting because it's like it's crazy. I just posted a whole bunch of pictures of a whole bunch of the people that I've play tested with on my Facebook. And people are like, holy crap, that's a pedigree of like a ton of different playtests. I'm like, technically they were all playtests. Some of them were pitches, but I didn't say they were actual playtests. But yeah, it's just cool to have played a game with so many different people and try to create something that's not the same as other games. there's like this genre that is 4X, and it's like I didn't want to make another 4X game. I wanted to make a 4X game that was completely outside the box of the other ones, you know?
Well, like, deep down, my philosophy with games is it's about joy and how I can personally try and put more joy into the universe. People love playing games. It's a way they can interact with their friends, with their families, build lifelong friendships with people, and I really love that I have the opportunity. I again have the privilege of making games to bring joy into the world, and so I want to find as many special and unique ways to do that as I possibly can. And it's when you see a game that makes you go, "What? Really?" A game that is slightly harder to explain to your friend Tom, and they need a moment to wrap their mind around. That's the kind of experiences I want to be creating.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and it's cool because I mean, we all just play games to relax, and yeah, they're kids' toys and all this stuff, and people can say whatever, and a lot of that's true. But it also you can build relationships around these games. You can have these experiences. Like I remember so many games I've played with people. Like I'm never going to forget those memories and those experiences. And my relationship to those people sometimes is tied to some of these experiences we have had around the table. And I feel like it just makes us stronger all together. And it's cool as a designer that you get to try to help create those experiences for people to have around the table.
Exactly, and more than anything else, that's the reward I take away from games is that we get to have we have the honor of engaging in these structures that bring joy.
Well, I guess we should take another question. Kabuki Kid says, what is a dream IP that you would like to design for?
Oh man, I used to say Fallout, but then I got the opportunity to work on that with Dane on the New California expansion, which was really a big treat for me. Ah, man, that's so hard.
It's funny because Z from the channel, every single year he does yearly predictions, and he's like, "This is the year that the Fallout LCG comes out. Fallout LCG." Never happened. It hasn't happened yet. So Brad has a Fallout LCG that's going to come out. That he had been working on forever ago. That hasn't happened yet.
I do have a pretty cool idea for a Fallout LCG, but
force somebody to make it.
yeah. I mean, gosh, dream IP. Probably, I'd honestly love to do a Pokemon game.
Ooh, that. I cannot believe that there's not a like this is the quintessential Pokemon board game. I mean, there's tons of like old school mass marketing style stuff, but there's like I can't think of one single Pokemon like hobby game. You know, it's crazy.
Well, they're really careful with their license, and they're looking if you're going to make the Pokemon game, you need to make a supremely immersive experience, and you know, I would really love the opportunity someday. It's been a big part of my life. My journey as a gamer, Pokemon has just really been a big thing for me, and I'd love to do a game.
It's so crazy because I remember getting the Pokemon Red back in the day for my Game Boy, and I remember right after that we went to go see the Phantom Menace because it was like my birthday, and Phantom Menace Star Wars came out, and it was like I just remember all this stuff. We actually liked it at the beginning, but now you can't say that you like it. And then when the card game came out and like got huge in America, everybody was collecting and playing this Pokemon card game, and I had played card games before, so I was building decks of Pokemon cards and trying to find kids to play with. And they're like, "We don't play this game. We just like collect it." And I'm like, "No, let's I can help you build a deck. Let's play against each other." It's just so crazy how the phenomenon of the cards back in the day, nobody actually played it like with the kids that were around my age. But since I had so much other experience with other collectible card games, I was like, let's play this game, you know?
Yeah, no, there's just so much to that IP, and there's so much depth, and there's so many different iconic characters. I think there's just a lot you can do, and because it's based on a game, you have so many structures. The key is making sure you're creating a Pokemon experience that isn't trying to, in my opinion, mimic the game experience, but let you see it from a different perspective while still engaging in the things that make Pokemon wonderful.
Yeah, I can't wait. I hope it happens someday. Like, if somebody can make it, I'll buy it. Whoever, do it. Make it happen. I've thought about, like, man, I should make a Pokemon game just for fun, just so I can play it. I'm just like, that is completely pointless. I don't know.
I remember back in college, we took a couple of different role playing systems and we tried to hack together a like Pokemon role playing game and had a lot of fun with that. But man, if you were really to go to town on that, you could make a really cool experience.
There was a actual like kids game that came out around the same time as the card game, and it came with like a little adventure book. It was extremely simple, and I found out about this game and I actually bought it, and I've played it with my kids several times. It's pretty funny, but it's like a little thing where it's got like each Pokemon, you roll a d6 to see how much damage they do. It's got this little storybook that basically goes through like the first like almost the first, not full season, but the first few episodes of the anime. So it's very much follows along the beats of the anime, and you're like running into stuff, and Pikachu's electrocuting you and stuff like that. But it's supposed to be story driven, and you're supposed to have this narrative with your kids as you play it. And I thought that was very interesting, and it'd be really cool if there was more stuff out there like that, you know?
It'd be really interesting to do something in that vein, a la like Caruso Crew from Van Ryder games.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Just do the whole storybook thing and stuff.
That'd be cool. It'd be definitely an interesting way to engage, both with the thematics and mechanics of it.
Let's see. Let's read Gator Dave's long thing here. Okay, I've heard that the ongoing L5R story was affected by tournament play in the early days, in which clans that did well, and which clans did well. Was it or still is it the case? And do you see that being adopted by other games? Basically, tournament play affecting the actual storyline of a game itself.
Yeah, and so that was true for the original AEG version of the game, and has been true for many of the decisions that have been made in the FFG version of the game. From my understanding, that's still true as far as FFG is concerned. I believe they just went through, and again, I've been a little disconnected, having been working for Mondo for a while now, but I believe they've just had a event where some of the players that they've been achieved the rank of Hatamoto, meaning they've done very well at tournaments, got to all vote for a future story decision. I honestly think it's a really, really cool and unique aspect of the game. I haven't seen too many other games try and pull it off. It is a ton of work, making sure that you have options and can respond quickly with story. I'd love to see some other titles try and do it, especially, I don't know, Renegade's got that new vampire ECG coming out. I'd love to see more from that. I really, really enjoyed the game back in the day, so I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's very interesting to see like some of these old school like CCGs or LCG stuff come back, like being reprinted. I know Netrunner was huge when it came back. It's like, holy smokes, this is crazy, and now it's gone again.
One day.
Is there a previous game that you would like to work on that hasn't been around for a long time, but like you would love to see come back into vogue?
Oh man. Jeez. You know, it's such a hard question. I'd really like to see another take on something like Pirates of the Spanish Main. Did you ever play that one?
Oh yes, I remember when that game first came out. Like I actually went to like organized play for that, which was kind of crazy.
I really just enjoyed the accessibility, because usually miniature games are really opaque and they're hard to get into, and they take a lot of time and effort to even get going. And so being able to just open a pack, pop out a ship, and start playing was one of the great experiences. I remember in high school, a couple of friends and I got really into it, and we just spent days building fleets and coming up with modes. At one point, I was even working for fun on a story campaign that you could play through with a game master, to play through it, and then players, as they would gather gold, would be able to upgrade their ships and such. That never quite got off the ground, but I felt like there was still a ton of potential in that because the toy element was so much fun to interact with.
Yeah, I remember like back in the day, it was kind of interesting because like the regular game was very much like a race to try to find gold and bring it back to your like little home area. It's very interesting because I remember the first time I popped open one of the ships with like a whole bunch of masts. I was like, oh my goodness, I have a giant ship now. What in the world? I don't know.
No, it was a fun adventure, and I'd loved it to see more potential like pulled out of that system and that mechanic. It was just, again, so easy to pick up, similar to like, again, not to bring it back around to Unmatched, but Epic Duels being repurposed as Unmatched is like such a great fit, and such a great revive. It's been really wonderful seeing Restoration go through and pick up these titles and working with them. It's, again, been wonderful. I can't wait to see some of the other games. Key to the Kingdom.
It'll be awesome to see. I mean, I don't know if you mess with it much, but we had the Dark Tower actually in the studio with all of the stuff spinning and whirling. It's just like that game is going to be crazy when it actually hits people's tables.
I'm looking forward to it. I kickstarted it myself.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, when do you think you like knew that you were like a game designer? Because you said you were designing games just as a kid, just for fun, like all the time. Like, what kind of led you to the fact of knowing like you want to design games?
I think it was in college, honestly, when I was forcing my friends to play my bad games that I was making, and I was writing a lot of like party style LARPs at the time, just for fun and having little events on campus, and just seeing how much fun everyone was having and the way you could turn someone's day around or turn their week around, and how weeks later they'd still be talking about the experience that you had, that they had, that feeling of gratification there, and that sense that I could have a positive impact, even if it was just through a game, on someone else's life, really felt like something I wanted to do. It was just taking time to understand that like I wanted that so much more than I wanted to be in academia.
It's so funny, like for me, I remember like as a kid, like I was probably like 11 or like 10 or something, and I had a whole bunch of like Z-Bot figures, and I had like written up a whole bunch of stats for all of them, and I wanted to make this system where you had like a point buy, because I had seen it in like role-playing games that I played on like the Nintendo and stuff like that. I'm like, I want a point buy where you can like change your stats on your characters, and like I had like a little ruler, and I'd never played a miniatures game in my life, and I'm like, yeah, I want to be able to do this with my characters, and I never made it happen. And we played a bunch of Gamma World back in the day. My dad taught us this role-playing game that was like post-apocalyptic with all these mutants and stuff. I was like, man, it would be cool if there was Gamma World, but like the Lord of the Rings characters. Like if you could be like dwarves and hobbits and fairies and like all this different stuff. And because my parents they didn't allow us to like play D&D, even though we were playing Gamma World and stuff like that. We didn't even really know what D&D was. So we kind of like backwards engineered D&D, and we were like, me and my friends were sitting in the closet being like, yeah, the dagger should be a D4, and like a D6 should be the sword, which is basically exactly what it is in D&D. It was just so hilarious, like back in the day, just because we didn't have access to that, we were kind of like making it ourselves. But then I ended up doing a lot more board game media stuff, and I did a whole bunch of like role-playing game stuff, and I feel like people who do like game mastering role-playing games are kind of like game designers in their own right, you know?
And it's interesting how even with those basic pieces, your guys' young brains kind of converged on the same idea that had been around for so long. It just shows how like evocative different dice being for different weapons is.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we got a lot of it from the fact that we were playing other role-playing games, but we still made this like, it's basically we made this arena combat game where we're rolling dice and hitting each other. And I'm like, it's not that far off from games that actually get released these days, you know?
Well, there's so many games coming out these days, and it's wonderful seeing how many are out there, but it's hard to keep track.
If there is someone out there that's like interested in game design, do you have like any tips on like what they should do or how they can like hone their craft or what they should look at to try to like learn how to make a game that will stand apart in the industry?
You know, the first thing I always tell new designers is just get started. If you
Mm.
have a game idea, put it together. Take a day. Don't take any longer than that. Take a day, put together a prototype, and it's totally okay if the first couple plays don't go the way you think. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, in a way you kind of hope they don't, because you're trying to test that base idea you have,
Mm-hmm.
and get it. The faster you can get it to the table, the faster you can see the weaknesses in it and the problems with it. You don't want to be spending 2 months putting a prototype together to get it to the table and be like, crap, like my main thesis is not true, and I just wasted 2 months getting this together and perfecting it, and being like, oh, if I'm spending an hour agonizing whether something's a 4 or 5, I'm doing it wrong. Like, the goal is to test your mechanics, get it to the table as
Mm-hmm.
quickly as you can. And that's my first thing, is if you have a game idea, you want to try and make it, just do it. Sit down, make as quick a version of it as you can. Like, when I start with a new card game, often I will just take blank pieces of paper. I'll take
Mm-hmm.
blank cards and I'll set them on the table. And I'm trying to quickly put together the most simple version of the game I possibly can, with absolutely no abilities. Just like, okay, I can put guys in the front,
Mm-hmm.
and then they can hit your guys. And if it's not, because like you'll be able to tell just from that, if it's not fun moving the pieces of paper around in the way that you would in the game, don't go anymore. Like, change your idea, try something different. Don't be locked into anything, because the places you're going to find fun are going to surprise you. The ways that you're going to interact with your mechanics, it's going to surprise you, and you need to roll with that.
I do you have any like tips for like it's kind of interesting because how do you get people to actually play the game with you? I mean, I always feel so awkward to be like, oh, you want to play this prototype or that prototype because it's probably going to be bad, you know?
Something I did in my early career is I would go to game stores, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously COVID being what it is, it's not the most viable option right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Tabletop Simulator, you might be able to work this. And I like going to a game store and saying, "Hey, my buddy asked me to play test this game," and asking people to play the game with you. Like, don't even make, because I don't like them to think it's me
Yeah.
that's asking them to test this, and because they'll change when you're in that complete blind play testing. They'll
Mm-hmm.
change how they interact with you and how they feel about the game, because, like, when people know I'm a designer and they sit down to play my games, I'm like, it's okay, I'm a game designer, I don't have any feelings, you can't hurt my
Right.
feelings by telling me my game sucks. I want to know if my game sucks.
Yeah,
Please tell me if
exactly.
my game sucks, because I don't want to release a bad game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to disappoint or waste anyone's money. I want games to create a wonderful experience for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I would go in and I wouldn't even tell them it's my game. I just want your raw feedback. And honestly, when game stores open up again, that's really the best way to get your initial playtesting done.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, bring it to different conventions. They have playtest halls, great for finding people coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, keep on getting testing, keep on testing, keep on iterating, keep on changing, keep following the fun in your design.
Mm-hmm.
How many times do you make a design and find out that the main thing that you wanted to do isn't working, but this sub mechanic is super fun? So either you retool the game to be around that sub mechanic, or you put the sub mechanic up on the shelf and you have it for later.
Yeah, for
I,
sure. I really think there needs to be some sort of like unpub online or like there has to be some groups out there that are like this is how you put your prototype on Tabletop Simulator. This is how we like you do different slots. You all play each other's games, and I mean I know experienced designers have groups that are just built in. They have their playtest team, they have their development team, they have all their stuff, and from that point it becomes easy because it's like, you guys, it's your job to help me playtest this, you know. And when you're just starting out there and you don't have a rapport of being an actual game designer because you're just starting out, you end up having to be like, hey, try this, you know. My experience is I'm a crazy person, and I always tried to make the game look super good, which is probably not the best idea. But like, I'm like, if it looks good, if it looks decent, maybe people will play it with me, you know. But that's so much effort if you end up having to throw stuff out, you know, because then you've just worked on stuff that you're gonna have to throw away.
And you know what, you're gonna have to throw stuff away, and that's a big thing that I encourage is that quick and dirty prototype, the one that gets to the point and gets your mechanics down, is often a much better place to start than trying to refine it and make it perfect, because you personally invest part of yourself for every minute that you work on a board game.
Yeah.
You're putting a piece of yourself into it, and the more and more you put into it before you have to make major changes, the harder and harder it is to make those changes. The more justifications you'll make for yourself for not changing it, and more you'll put in your way. But oftentimes those are the things you need to do.
Is there a game you think that you've put the what's the game that you've put the most amount of hours into overall, as far as like gameplay development, playtesting, all of that stuff?
Keyforge by a long shot.
Gotcha.
Just you know, we worked on it for years before it came out or was even announced. It changed and evolved so much from, you know, Richard's original design to what it is now, and then what it's become and the systems behind it. Like that game was years in the making. It was such a long journey, and then building an entire IP along with it and getting to be part of that process of building that IP has been that's probably the longest.
How much would you say you had to work on like the technology side of it, like trying to figure out exactly, is there a lot of the design, I mean, you design the cards, but then it's like tweaking algorithms and tweaking percentages of like how much does this card need to show up, how much does this thing need to happen?
Yeah, and honestly, we completely built the algorithm system in the back end. Richard had an original design, but the current version of it is different in many different ways than what he originally pitched. And so we really had to design a deck creation system from the ground up to deliver on the promise of the game. And so there was a ton that just went into the technology. Yeah, that was like, we had a whole technology team that we had to build up, and they were with us all the way for like 2-ish years, getting everything working and perfected.
What was I gonna say? Was there ever like, what was your favorite like name that this thing spit out? Because I know you put a whole bunch of words in there and it just come up with crazy names. Did you ever have a deck that was like, this deck name is my favorite, like this is hilarious, you know?
I think it was Sea Turtle, the Explorer of the Aquarium.
Nice.
I was just like, oh, that's so appropriate. Like, of course.
How did this happen? Was there like a special algorithm? I guess there had to be, because it was all very much like a title and a name and all that stuff. You had to have specific algorithms just for the name part, specific algorithms for the layers of the background, a specific algorithm for the distribution of cards, you know.
Mm-hmm. And we completely rebuilt the name generator from scratch. It's probably one of the most advanced name generators that's ever been built, to be honest, because it can take from so many different structures and titles. It's got the equivalent of, I think it's like, at one point we stacked up a set of books that was probably, you know, like half as tall as I am, and I'm about 2 meters tall, so probably a meter tall of books that was the equivalent of words that are in the name generator.
That's crazy.
And that's from the beginning, and we've only added to it.
I think there were some things you guys did take out, though.
Yeah, a couple of them.
That's awesome.
2 or 3 here and there.
But yeah, that's so crazy. I don't know. That stuff just really fascinates me. I think that the I know there's some designers out there that are starting to implement a little bit of like machine learning in their playtest a little bit. And it's kind of interesting the prospects of like using a computer to help you run the numbers on like your math in the game. It's like, okay, well, I need to figure out this complex, like what should the values on these things be, and running it through a computer to see how it works, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I can't wait to see what people are going to be coming out
Mm-hmm.
with it. For me, like lately, it's been looking at how just back to those new experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
that's really what I want the voice of Mondo to be,
Gotcha.
is finding those new experiences and finding ways for players to engage in new play.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely be lookout for some of Mondo's stuff. I'm really excited to be
I
able
know
to
we
bring
haven't
those
even
experiences.
talked about it yet, but you guys have a game that is coming out that just recently got announced.
Yes, I mean, sort of announced. It's a little under wraps, but we're launching a two-player Disney card game this Tuesday,
Wow.
um, and you'll be able to kind of already maybe find it in a couple stores
Oh,
as have been
snap.
reported. So Disney Shadowed Kingdom. It's a two-player cooperative Disney card game. It's a
Mm.
lot of fun, great to play with your kids,
Wow.
and really sells on kind of a new take on the Disney IP.
That's awesome. I know we were in the office and they come across like our screen and we're just like that Mondo Games, they're coming out with a new game. Oh, that looks awesome. It looks almost like Kingdom Hearts. What's going on here? And I'm like, I have Brad on the show. Like I got to talk to him about it. So,
Yeah. Can't say too much again. We're some stuff with the licensor. It's a little
mhm.
tough,
Oh, I'm sure.
but we're figured it out. And again, some sneak peeks on BGG the other day, I believe, on the main post, the main news post. They were talking about it. But again, this Tuesday should be hitting a lot more info on it.
Mm.
So keep your eyes peeled. It's a really fun game, cool experience.
I guess it's going to definitely be an interesting shift for you. I know FFG had a ton of IPs and stuff, but now you're going to be like in IP heaven. Is there any specific thing that you try to focus on the fact that you're going to be working with these IPs, but trying to make them be shown in the right light? I'm sure the licensors want things to be done a certain way.
Yeah, it's definitely like I've worked with licensors for a long time on
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars and Warhammer and various things like that. It's about selling the feel,
Mm.
because when you're looking at like a film or a beloved comic book series or whatever, it has a feel, it has an essence, and you want your game to deliver on that feel,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want it to be a shadow of the experience you would have from the original IP, and in that you don't want it to be trying to be explicitly the same experience. So, like if I'm doing a movie, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to just walk you through the events of the movie in the game. At that point, you should just go watch the movie. I want to take the feel the movie has, the energy it has, the way it makes you think about things. And I want to take a game that honors those things, honors the investment that you, as a person that is a fan of that, put into it, and gives you a play experience that makes you feel excited about that IP, not
Mm-hmm.
just about watching it, but being a fan of it, and just makes you go, oh man, I just really love this.
Mm-hmm.
It speaks to me as a person, and that's the type of content I want to be making. I want people to know that they are celebrated as a fan of these things.
I think that's going to be awesome to be able to tie all of like that nostalgia and that fandom together and try to create those experiences for people. I think that's going to be really cool. I'm really excited to see what you're going to come out with there at Mondo. So,
Yeah, and we have a great precedent with stuff like our the Thing board game. If you
mm-hmm.
guys haven't gotten a chance to play that, I know it's a little hard to get a hold of, but it's a really great experience
Mm-hmm.
and really honors the movie. And yeah, man, the quality put into that game was one of the things that really attracted me to working at Mondo in the first place.
That's awesome. Um, So we're pretty much drawing to a close here with our time. If people want to learn more about the games you're working on, learn where they can follow you or keep up with things you're currently doing, where can they find all of that stuff?
So any of our games can be purchased from mondoshop.com. You can also see all of our, famous movie posters, apparel, and other collectibles that we
Mm-hmm.
make. Mondo's got a lot of different licenses, and we have a ton of passionate people that are creating some wonderful things.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in me personally, best place would be on Twitter. You can get me at Darbimus Prime, at DARBIMUSPRIME. And then you see all the updates about all the crazy stuff I'm working on.
Awesome. Well, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show, and it's been really cool because I really enjoy a lot of the games you've worked on. So it'll be really cool to see what you do in the future. So we'll definitely keep in touch on that stuff and cover it here on the Dice Tower. So awesome.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
Well, thanks everybody for coming out and chat, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.